Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo, Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is great to see everyone. Welcome to a very unusual Friday night here on Table Talk. I might be unfocused. Who knows? We'll just see. We'll have to see here. I had to reset my system today. Just a few minutes before the stream, but anyway, I'll work on the focus in a moment. It's so good to see everybody. We have a very unusual Friday night stream here. Ordinarily, we stream on Tuesdays, but we're kind of wrong-footed this holiday season because last Tuesday was Christmas Eve. I had things going on. Next Tuesday is New Year's Eve, and I'm probably going to be away for New Year's Eve. So this holiday season, all of a sudden, Tuesdays were taken. But Nosferatu dropped. I went to see it Christmas Day, and there are so many people who have things to say about it. We're like, hey, let's do it Friday night. Let's do it Friday night. So actually, we assembled kind of this live stream in an impromptu way this afternoon. But actually, we've got an all-star cast here for everybody for everybody tonight, and it's so great to see everybody in the chat. I didn't know if we'd have anybody show up because we don't normally stream on Friday nights. But you're all here, so we're going to have a great time. We have got a fantastic panel for tonight. We have got. First of all, Douglas A. Burton, welcome, welcome. We have got James Bacon.
Hello, hello.
And back, yes, it has been way too long. We've got Cameron Pasha. And this is the first time that Cameron and Bacon have been on the stream together. They've seen each other in the comments, or Cameron's seen Bacon in the comments, but it's the first time they've been on the stream together.
That's great. And I want to, and it's wonderful to be on. It's been a long time since I've been on here, and I actually want to welcome some people from my Facebook have come on board. In fact, a good friend of mine who is a wonderful Hawaiian mystic visionary. He's in the chat, and so yeah. So everyone have fun today. We're going to talk about Nosferatu. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
Yes, it is going to be a lot of fun. It's so good. This is going to be a shocker for Cameron, with Cameron here, that like there's a movie that I went to the movie theater that I'm here to talk with him about that I also enjoyed. So like
you have high standards. You have high standards.
Yeah. Yes, and so I was very glad that we did War of the Bacon and I did War of the Rohirrim, and that was it was forgettable. So I was so glad to finally have gone to the movie theater and seen something that I really enjoyed seeing. So, all right, how do we start this off? Cameron, you want to start us off? What do you think?
Sure. I mean, I guess new guest who hasn't been on in a very long time, right? So I'll take that privilege. But no, like I mean, this is a movie that I've been waiting for all year since I saw the first trailer for it and I heard about it. I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers. I love The Witch. I love The Northman. I haven't seen his other film yet, but it's but those two are just perfect for me because I love these period pieces and magic and mysticism and the occult, and he takes you back into this time period. And one of the rules that seem to be in all the movies I've seen of his, including Nosferatu, is that, he believes this stuff is real and you believe this stuff is real. I mean, there's no sense of fantasy in it, in the sense that there's fantastic things are happening visually and stunning things, right? But, he goes to the rules of the universe and you just go with it because that's how the world is. And he has this ability to create worlds. So I was excited for this, and Nosferatu is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Talk about the 1922 F.W. Murnau film. So to have a filmmaker, an artistic genius of this caliber, try to do it. A few others have tried to do Nosferatu, and they've done interesting jobs with it. And I like the Shadow the Vampire version of it as well. But this one that's really, I think, come close to what Murnau was trying to do, and so I think it's very special.
And Brianna and I did talk about the original Nosferatu here on the channel. The live stream is here. She and I did a stream. That. Yeah, so she and I did a stream on the original. She hasn't seen it yet. That's why she's not here. But this may be one of those situations where we need to do more than one stream on it because Brianna still got to watch it. I also love the book, the Bram Stoker's Dracula. So yeah, I know she's been reading that and wants to talk about that. And also, we never got a chance to talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula, like the movie with Keanu Reeves. So this could be a multiple episode stream on.
Yeah, because this movie intersects. And my review on Patreon, I do see the comparisons with what Coppola did, in his version of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And what I will say is the novel is absolutely incredible. It holds up 120, 130 years later. It's an amazing creative work of art because it's not a normal novel. It's all log entries and diaries and journals and this. I mean, the fact that he created Dracula and created this incredible mythos, and then he did it in this completely unusual literary format. That's a whole other layer of what Stoker accomplished.
Well, speaking, he really elevated the novel. Go ahead, James. I was just going to say to further support what Cameron was saying. In my small little town in Pennsylvania, they still teach Dracula in high school and then also at the university that I attended. So it is for the ages for sure.
Yeah, and there's a whole universe of lore around the vampire, and you got Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel, which, as Cameron said, is not a traditional novel. It's not just chapter 1, 2, and 3. For those who haven't read it, it's an entire system of what would be 19th century documentation of events, a captain's log, a newspaper article. And as you flip through, you will tumble into this story and be absolutely transfixed by it. I remember being completely gripped by reading this and feeling the thrill that only a novel can give you, right? It's psychological. It just grips you. And Bram Stoker's Dracula does that. So to adapt it to film is in and of itself its own challenge. And what's interesting is that the 1922 version of Nosferatu by Murnau is actually kind of a spin-off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. How would you say it, Cameron?
Oh, I would say that I'm sorry, you asked Cameron.
Unauthorized adaptation.
Oh, okay. I would say that it is a wholesale ripoff. The history of the film is that in 1922, they couldn't get the rights or chose not to get the rights. So they changed the place and they changed the names and they changed certain details about it. Stoker's widow actually sued them, and a German court ruled that all copies of the film should be destroyed, but several survived. And so we have it now today. So a resurgence of this type of horror film, especially Nosferatu, it ends up, and I'm doing quite a bit with Myth and Young on my channel currently with regard to role-playing games, but it has become a mythic sort of a film for the transcendence across cultures, but as well as for the fact that the film itself kind of mirrors Orlok, right? He was killed and then comes back and spreads fear, and it's the same thing with the movie. They attempted to kill it, it's come back, and now it spreads fear. I love the fact that particular piece of history, film history, is just so incredibly vibrant with regard to the genre and the film as a subject. I apologize, Cameron. I was excited to say that. I didn't mean to speak.
No, there's no problem. There's nothing to apologize. We're all excited. We're flowing, and we're gonna talk over each other. And I ask forgiveness in advance for when I'm gonna do that. Okay. It's just we're excited and we're full of energy here. And so everything you said is what I would have said is that I would have talked about this copyright thing, but I want to throw in early some interesting occult aspect of it, which people don't talk about. So the filmmakers, and I think Murnau himself, but the producers and people involved were part of a secret society. This is historical. This is conspiracy theory. They're part of a European secret society called.
This movie or the original?
The original.
The original. Okay.
The original. They were part of a German secret society called the Fraternitas Saturni. There's a great book on it. You can get it on Amazon. Great book on the history of the Fraternitas Saturni, which was an early sort of a magical occult group in Germany. Standard derived from the Illuminati kind of thing. But this is a historical group that was doing Western magic. Right, sort of like Aleister Crowley, but in the German version of it, right, in the 1920s. And they had a lot of powerful, significant people, including the arts, including in the burgeoning silent film industry. And so what's fascinating is that they found, like historians have found records of some of the conversations or journals or notes from people of that lodge, the Fraternitas Saturni, and their intent was to create a film that would allow them to manifest in physical form the spiritual egregore of their group, and that takes the form of Orlok. So Orlok is designed makeup-wise to look like the bat-headed, bald-headed egregore of the sort of spiritual being that was the Saturni, that was the center of their worship or whatever, their magic. And so there's this interesting occult thing of why that movie it remains so terrifying. Maybe it was channeling some kind of actual occult force. Maybe Max Schreck, who is an stunning, incredible actor that you can't get your eyes off of, even though you don't want to look, right? Maybe it's not just his utter genius as an actor that created that character. Maybe there's some occult phenomenon happening in this film as well.
Yeah, I always believe that when a film really smacks you in the face, it kind of stays in there, that it has tapped into something primal, whether you understand it or not. And that's what I love about archetypes. You don't need language to understand it. You can put it on a silent film. My secret definition of archetype is something that you recognize even in dreams. I don't need any language to interpret the dark-clad figure in the doorway. Like, I know to be terrified at a primal level. So what Cameron's saying makes sense to me, in that there's something possibly in there that maybe you can articulate it, maybe not. But it is staying with you, and it's doing something in the heavy lifting category of your fear, your human fear.
Yeah, and the other movie that people, that seems to have the same phenomenon is the other movie that I would rank. I personally just rank these two as the two greatest horror movies ever made, which I consider Nosferatu 22 to be one of those two, and the other one being The Exorcist. Right. And as anyone, The Exorcist is very well documented history that strange phenomenon started happening on that set. The crew believed that they had summoned the devil by making this film, and they stopped work on it until an exorcist had actually been brought in to bless the set. Right. And so there is, and again, it had the same reaction. I think sadly, I think the 1922 film was knocked out of distribution by the legal order, so it didn't have the reaction they wanted to until many generations later when it could be released, right? But Exorcist certainly had the reaction that I think Nosferatu was aiming for, of that public visceral reaction.
Oh, just brute force terror. The asymmetrical, chaotic no logic to it. I think that's what's so scary to me about The Exorcist when I watch it is it's completely illogical. It's totally random and it's horrifying. And you just there's nothing you can grab a hold of. You're just shocked by it like over and over again.
Well, the Titter Pig Rancher, who, by the way, Cameron, you will know is Sable Phoenix. So the Titter Pig Rancher, Sable has changed it because he's launching his own channel now on tabletop RPGs for $15.
And I always thought Sable Phoenix was a girl, but I keep being corrected that it's not. But maybe in 2023, it's all good. I think maybe 2025 we're all going back to a little bit more binary, but who knows? It's all good.
The original Nosferatu set up so much what we recognize as contemporary vampire lore. Yes, it's highly influential on that, such as sunlight being lethal. Much of what we think of as vampire rules weren't in the original Stoker's Dracula, which is true. Correct. It's been a long time since I've read Stoker's Dracula. The death of the vampire in the book versus the original 1922 Nosferatu versus this one is something that I want to talk about. But yes, that idea that vampires the sun is lethal to them got brought in.
Yeah, because and Coppola did that. Coppola actually followed the Bram Stoker novel rule, which was that sunlight weakens them. They still have power. Like Dracula still has the ability to hypnotize and do other things, but he's not at his full. I don't know if maybe he can't transform, maybe he can't do other things. But in the original novel, Jonathan Harker sees Dracula standing in the middle of London, a younger looking Dracula than the man he had met in Transylvania. And so that rule was established that the sunlight doesn't kill them, at least in Bram Stoker's version, and Coppola followed it.
Well, technically in Nosferatu, it's not the sunlight that kills him. It's not returning to the cursed earth in which he was buried. But that has over time sort of adapted into the sunlight having this deleterious effect.
Yeah. What's interesting that again, I don't want to. I guess we're gonna do a little bit of spoilers here.
This is spoilers. This is spoilers. Yes.
The ending of Egger's Nosferatu and Murnau's Nosferatu are a little bit different because this is from the 1922. And it was an amazing effect in 1922. He disintegrates in the sunlight, right? So it really does appear to the eye that the sunlight itself is what kills Shrek's vampire. Sure. But then in this one, spoiler alert, the ending is very parallel to but the body doesn't disintegrate in the sunlight.
Yeah, and what a scene that was in the movie. One thing I wanted to add too, and I'll keep this brief, but the one thing I've always really loved about Dracula and Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992 and now Nosferatu is, so I'm a Byzantine enthusiast, and one of the books I've written is Byzantine. Takes place in the Byzantine Empire. It's historical fiction. And I've always loved the Byzantine Empire. One of my great laments is there are so few stories and films out there that genuinely take place in the Byzantine Empire. You say medieval Japan, there's a ton of stuff. You say China, a ton of stuff. Medieval Europe, ton of stuff. Byzantine Empire is like blacked out. Like there's so few. And if you find a few, they're real scant. Or they're like vaguely referred to. One of the things about Bram Stoker's
Western European cultural prejudice, I think, but that's
I totally agree. The Byzantine Empire is a Roman Empire divorced of Europe, and it's a Middle Eastern version of the Roman Empire. And to me, it's spectacular, and I love the Byzantine Empire. But so one of the things I loved in 1992 when I was watching Bram Stoker's Dracula is they show the top of the Hagia Sophia. It's on this big angle. And I'm like, the Byzantine Empire represented.
And the cross gets knocked down and the Islamic crescent gets put on it. Yeah.
Yes, totally. It's all part of the Middle Eastern lore that took place in that time, which is
because Vlad Dracula is based on Vlad Dracul of right. That time, who was a warrior against the Ottomans, right? And that is there is in the original novel there is one line that refers. That Dracula essentially talks about his ancestor, which is him fighting the Turks. So it is referenced in the novel. Right? It is in the novel, but they don't develop it. Whereas, the opening of Coppola does essentially develop it. And I went to Romania. I went and did a Dracula tour of Romania. I went to all the places, Budapest, Bucharest. I went to Poinari Castle, which is where the opening scene takes place in Poinari Castle, right? And that is the actual legend of the time that Vlad Dracula's wife jumped from the tower when the Ottomans took it. right? When and then she died. It's called the river underneath. It's called the Red River for her allegedly her blood turned the river red. That kind of legend, right? But that is a real legend that that Dracula that only intensified his hatred for the Ottomans, and he was basically on the run after that, and was just essentially a hit and run terrorist for a long time before he could get land back to try to fight. So yeah, the Coppola did his research,
right? Well, and there's something special about Eastern Europe, and I think there's something that is intrinsically fascinating to the Western mind about Eastern Europe, which is the end of the Byzantine era. You think about Christianity in Europe; it's very biblical, or it's like literary and scientific, and and Greek. There's a certain they try to Platonize the entire. But when you go into the Byzantine Empire, there's a certain Christian mysticism that is very strong in the Byzantine Empire. And that's one of the underpinning parts of the lore of Dracula. And that's something I personally love. And I was happy to see it in Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. And what was interesting in Eggers is he kind of moved away from pure mysticism with like trinkets in the. And man, you got a real heavy dose, in my opinion, of just hard, brute superstition. Eastern European superstition.
Yeah, there's no references. There's almost, there is a scene with a nun and, convent and all that, but you're not using Christian symbols to fight this thing. If you notice that sort of the doctor figure, right? That character, he's chanting alchemical incantations, right? He's not using Christian symbolism or liturgy. He's using medieval alchemists and prayers that are coming out of occult groups, and there's almost no Christianity in that film, which goes down to the fact that this is
excellent point.
It's something primordial. And again, if I may reference, and I'm going to shut up, let other people speak. If I may reference, one of the interesting things that I learned when I was on my Romania trip, as I talked to some scholars, Romanian scholars, when I was there, and one of them shared with me fascinating information that Vlad Dracula, in his lifetime, was believed to be a Strigoi, a vampire, in his lifetime by his people, because he was, this impaler that was impaling tens of thousands of people, including his own guys, right? He killed everybody, right? But in his lifetime, we have records, and it's interesting, German traders, because, Nosferatu is set in Germany, German traders, businessmen who were trading with Wallachia, which was the country at the time, wrote letters in his lifetime about how they were afraid of the local voivod, Vlad, because the people were afraid of him, that he was drinking blood and doing all kinds of occult rituals or satanic pagan occult rituals to achieve eternal life. So in his lifetime, his own people believed he had become a supernatural being. So Bram Stoker tapped into an actual living legend that's from Vlad Tepes's lifetime.
Wow, I love it. That's great. Yeah, so he found the things that were sticking in people's heads already, and then pulled those out and added them right into his story. That's just a great writer right there.
I'll say when I was traveling through Europe with a reference to Eastern Europe, I went to Vienna, and then I continued going east on my trips. And then when you go east of Vienna, it's my experience, I was like, look, I'm still in Europe, but it's weird Europe.
It's totally weird. Romania. If you guys haven't gone to Romania, it's incredible. I've been to Eastern. I love Eastern Europe. It's a beautiful world. Sort of my last name is Pasha, so maybe like an Ottoman connection to Eastern Europe. The need to conquer it. I don't know, whatever. But I've been to Bulgaria. I've been all over Eastern Europe, right? However, Romania is different. Bulgaria is right next door, and it doesn't look the same. Romania looks like a horror movie. Romania is your imagination of what a horror movie looks like. These mountains that are covered in mist all the time, forests that are just dark and go into. Bulgaria is next door. Doesn't look like that, right? Romania is magical. And the people of Romania, again, this is their legends. They said to me that they believe that their country is a portal to another world. That's why physiographically, whatever, it's just different. It looks like an occult, creepy, gothic nation. And they believe, and their own culture believes that they are a connection between two worlds.
Yeah, and there's something to that too. Like, just to throw out a teeny tiny little factoid, Bulgaria is world renowned for cuckoo clocks. Romania is world renowned for horror. So, there's definitely something to that.
Yeah. Although I will say the women are beautiful in both countries. It's ridiculous. It's like ridiculous. You're walking around, it's like this. It's like it's just supermodels everywhere. It's just insane. Well, that's other conversation.
Well, yeah, it is.
So next week we'll be live in Romania.
I know. Have I been into Romania?
Well, I'm the only one that hasn't been to Europe here, I think. So I should probably.
I've been to Turkey. I've been to Europe, Greece, Turkey, but I haven't been to the Upper Balkans like Albania.
I piss off
Romania.
my Turkish friends when I say, you guys really aren't Europe. They get really angry. I'm like, no, you guys aren't. You might have this little sliver of West Constantinople, West Istanbul. That ain't Europe.
When I went to Istanbul, I got to go to Asia for the first time. That was like I was actually in Asia because you get to go across, and I went to a Byzantine castle that you go up, and then I was actually on the other side, in Asia. So the Titter Pig Rancher says horror isn't necessarily about fear and terror, but about an oppressive sense of wrongness that characters and the audience, by extension, are powerless to stop. Eggers' Nosferatu piles up layer upon layer during its runtime.
I agree with this, and I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit. I can't remember who the conversation was with, but I had someone ask me really what was horror, and it might have been one of my own channel's guests, Ben Rimmer, and what I landed on was lack of control and the choice for disorder. Oh, it was evil. It wasn't horror. It was evil. What is what really is evil? Is it selfishness? Well, not necessarily. So what I landed on was that it's the choice for disorder. And when I say disorder, I mean it's a choice against the natural order, whether that's a spiritual order, whether that's an actual Mother Nature sort of order. That's what I landed on for evil. And I think that this film really, really taps into that. It also taps into the Jungian idea of the shadow, right? Like Orlok represents death and disease and to some degree the natural world, but the darker side of the natural world. So it's very much these ideas that humans tend to shut out and not think about, especially in the era that the original film was released.
But so on that, you reference a shadow, which is the signature of Nosferatu.
Yes.
Because Murnau used it throughout the original film.
Yep.
And this Eggers movie uses many of the same motifs of the shadow of the hand and all of that.
I am so glad they kept that shot in there. I'm so glad he decided to keep that shot. But yes, to speak to your point, the shadow is one of the four major archetypes in Jungian psychology, and it has to do with, it's not necessarily evil, though it can be. It also has to do with the refusal of things that you think you aren't, or holding certain things at bay, like maybe more primal instincts of humanity, more violent instincts, those sorts of things. So not necessarily evil, but in this film, I think it is genuinely represented by evil. And the fact that shadow literally it sort of embodies that archetype, and the way that it stretches out and reaches out over the small German town, and the way he's constantly, that's kind of how he moves, right? Like he just slinks along walls and slides in through curtains, but only in the shadowed areas. I think it's a very important piece to sort of interpreting this film as a myth, which I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I want to ask, did any of you ever read this novel by Elizabeth Kostova? She's a Romanian author who wrote a worldwide best-selling novel called The Historian, which is her take on the Dracula myth.
I have not.
I have not.
So it was a massive bestseller, and it's an interesting book, especially Douglas, because you'll like it because it's essentially a travelogue. The core idea is it tries to mimic what Stoker did, which is telling it from multiple journals and diaries and things like that. The major difference, so it's a woman who discovered her father's gone missing while he was looking for in the mythology of this book. She's a historian like her father was as an academic, and in doing research on the historical Vlad Tepes, he becomes to believe that Vlad Tepes really had become a vampire, like the legends of Romania at the time suggested, and that he had actually somehow communicated to Bram Stoker, and that the novel Dracula was the product of an actual revelation from the real Vlad Tepes, right? And so in researching this, her father disappears. And then she starts through her father's diary, she starts retracing his steps, and we go, that kind of log, and she travels all over Eastern Europe, rediscovering the histories of the Ottomans versus Eastern Europe that led to the creation of Vlad and all this, and where Vlad might have gotten the supernatural abilities to become a vampire. And it ultimately climaxes with her confronting Vlad, who really is a vampire, and it's a beautifully written book, but I have a major critique of it, which is that even though it tries to do the motif of the journal within a journal thing, right? The one thing she didn't master, which Stoker did, is that if you read Stoker's book, each of the journal entries or the diaries or the ship's logs, different characters, obviously, they're all, you can tell they're different voices. They're all different people's point of view. And he was very good at that. Like male point of view, female point of view. Mina Harker writes something, Lucy writes something. They're all different points of view. And you can recognize each character's voice. And this is what Ms. Kostova, I don't think, succeeded at, is that, if you open the book at any point, you're reading some journal or some diary or something, and you don't know because the voice sounds exactly the same as all the other
person.
Voices. It's her voice, right? And I mean, she's a first-time author. I mean, she became a worldwide bestseller, so I don't think she cares what my critique is, right? God bless her, right? But
Cameron, what's the name of the book?
The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, Kostova. It's worth reading because, in particular, it's a travelogue of Eastern Europe and a history lesson of the Ottomans and the Byzantines. So you, Doug, will love it because
oh my God, I've seen this book before.
You should read it because as someone who's fascinated by Byzantine history, she ties in the Byzantines and into the origin of the Dracula myth. It's a real travelogue and a history book.
That's so fantastic too, because it gives you that touchstone. Like vampirism in the old world was very much believed to have been real. It wasn't something that was a myth or something that people, thought that maybe the addled brains of the peasantry were the ones who were coming up with these ideas to explain things. This was treated even by the church. Okay, this is a real problem. How are we going to solve it? And I think that like historical accounts like this, like what you're talking about, Cameron, they're fantastic. But I think it's also really maybe important to understanding the perspective of some characters in the film, right? Like the doctor, he was okay, this is my problem. This is what I have to solve. This is what we have to fix. I think it's absolutely essential, I would say. So I'm not aware of this book. I have never read it, but I think I'm going to go ahead.
I mean, it is a good book. It's a beautifully written book. I mean, my critique of the voice, that's a critique, right? But the book is absolutely beautiful and it's worth reading.
I don't think your link went through, Doug. What's the name of the book? Let me find it because I'll post it.
Okay.
What was
hold on one second. I'm going to just step away from.
What was the name of the book?
The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. I've seen this book at some point. For some reason, I guess I never bought it because I never read it. But I'm going to read it now. Like, obviously, that I'm sold based on what Cameron was saying there. I mean, that's fantastic.
I'll post the link to it.
I love something that's entirely unrelated, but if you're interested in this sort of primary account history, there's a book called The Faithful Executioner that I would also recommend. It's a really, really great book. It's about an executioner in the service to a lord, and it's about the care he takes with his charges. It's a really, really great book. It was found, I think, like in a bookstore, a secondhand bookstore or something, original manuscript of this executioner's actual journal. And so it was turned into a book and published, and I absolutely love it. So again, entirely unrelated, but if this is your thing, then that will probably be your thing as well.
Okay. So now I'm going to jump to a specific thing that I noted in the film. We're talking again Eggers' film. Look, the production design, the makeup, all of it is stunning, right? But there's an interesting departure in the design of the vampire, which is very, very creepy and scary.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a corpse. But here it's interesting. It's the Murnau's, maybe that was just channeling their occult group. I don't know. But Murnau's, the famous thing of Max Schreck's Nosferatu is the bald head and the pointy ears and the bushy eyebrows. It was very simple, right? In fact, that became an archetype.
Because I'm the idiot that wears the band's shirt to go see the band. I'm wearing a. This happened.
Exactly. That's exactly. And look, Stephen King used that. In Salem's Lot. Buck Rogers used it in the Vorvon, one of the scariest episodes I ever saw as a kid of the space vampire. It looked just like the Nosferatu of Max Schreck, but this one looks different, right? It's more of a rotting flesh corpse person. Yes. But what's interesting is, he has some hair. It's not totally bald. He has some hair, and he's got a bushy mustache, like a 70s stash, right? And so that's an interesting choice because that's one of the things that most films haven't done correctly from the Bram Stoker novel, is that the original novel, Dracula has a bushy mustache, right? You know, because the original Vlad Dracula is famous for that handlebar mustache painting, right? I've seen it in the actual. I've seen the original painting in Romania, and so that's and that's how he's described. And in Coppola's film, they sort of make a reference to it because you see Gary Oldman have sort of this thin little stash, but as vampire, he doesn't have it because it doesn't. The people thought it doesn't look cool for a vampire to have a mustache, right? But this is interesting because it actually added sort of to the fact that this was a real person that had been turned into a living corpse. So it added to the grotesquerie of what Eggers did here.
I agree that I actually grotesquerie, and also I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
I just that was one of the most striking decisions for the monster's appearance, is that he had that mustache, and I think that it was an excellent decision because it completely covers the mouth until he needed to not be covered, right? So we're not constantly seeing this mouthful of teeth or fangs or anything like that. And I just really appreciated that decision because it allowed the film to focus on the fact that he was undead, he was evil, and it aided Orlok in sort of transcending this kind of, Max Schreck, bald, pointy-eared, pointy-toothed kind of a monster, and he became evil. He became death. And I really, really appreciated that decision.
Yeah, I think in coming full circle, we've seen all these different horrific faces and things like that. To kind of return to just a gaunt human face, I thought was a good choice. And the mustache, the big bushy mustache, struck me as Eastern European, from a different era. And yet, there's this face there. One thing I loved about the film was the introduction of the Nosferatu. There's this great, you enter this room and there's this haze. If Edgar did anything that to me stood out in terms of cinematography, it was the almost oppressive use of smoky haze, where you're getting this ambiguous, you can't quite see everything. And you see the face of the creature for the first time, it's just patches, like eyes, and there's a patch where the mouth is. And you're straining like you would through smoke at a campfire. What is that? What is this thing? And it's huge and it's imposing and it's sitting in this chair and you can't quite make it up. I thought it was extremely effective to have that humanoid face sitting there because there's something terrifying about a human face in and of itself, especially when there's something off about it.
Well, I want to return to another point that you just made, but I want to go that it's also, as far as the look of the vampire goes, what I was going to point out is that he is so large and physically imposing.
Yes.
Now, I also, which I think is also in contrast to the original Nosferatu, but also I love that Bram Stoker's Dracula movie. I was thinking my favorite vampire movies is, I don't know if this one beats it out or not, is Bram Stoker's Dracula. They're close. But, so many of these movies, including that one and the original Nosferatu, you're talking about a very thin, emaciated kind of vampire, which is, horrific and, evil when you're sitting across from it from a different reason. This one, this guy was large. This is, as far as I know, the first time, especially, it's a Dracula interpretation that I am personally aware of, where the character itself is so large and imposing. And so I thought that was a very interesting choice to not have a real spindly guy, again, being the vampire in this, being that the classic Nosferatu vampire from 1922 is so spindly. So, it seems like if you're going to do you're going to do this movie again, you go back to a very spindly kind of guy. But and we're going to talk about, I want to talk about the haze and the shadows and the way they use that in a moment. But even when they're doing that, this guy is one that physically occupies the screen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and there's a contrast there. So his figure is imposing. There's the big cowl over the shoulders, and there's the face that's very strong and chiseled and yet dark and obscure. But there's also this interesting contrast that I've always been interested in personally. And you've got this contrast of raw power, just by the presence alone, contrasted by evidence of weakness. He's
the wheezing.
Yeah. He is wheezing to
Darth Vader-esque wheezing.
I completely thought about Darth Vader. I completely thought Darth Vader that we want breathing to be part of this. I completely thought Darth Vader.
100%. So there's something that's disturbing about this crippling vulnerability. And yet when you're looking at this supposedly handicapped individual, you don't feel emboldened. You feel terrified that they're so imposing that the handicap doesn't seem to be working against them. It seems to be working against you. You're more scared of them because this handicap isn't. But
at the same time, Doug, when you're talking about that, Dracula, Orlok in this case, the vampire's got all of these magic powers, which can tear you a new one when he shows up in your bedroom. But in this case, he's also physically huge. I mean, even if he didn't have any magical powers, when this guy shows up in your bedroom, it's like, oh my God, like I got a problem here. It's not like this wheezing, spindly, short guy showed up, this very large. And actually, that is also like Darth Vader, because Darth Vader is also very physically present and very large. That's very
I think the largeness it lends itself to a sort of imposition. If you heard that large voice come out of a smaller spindly character, I don't think it would be as effective. And my God, Bill Skarsgård has to have had some sort of voice coach or something like that, or I don't know, maybe he was leaning on past roles. But what an incredible performance from him, especially in the vocalization. But the size of Orlok really it made that it gave it an element of terror that isn't necessarily present in other versions of the film.
What his voice reminded me of?
Include Dracula.
His voice reminded me of Evil Treebeard because he spoke slow and patient. Here's an immortal being who doesn't need to get his point out. He could take his time, but almost sounded like he was constructing the sentence as he was going, and and you were just like hanging on it because he spoke so. It was like Evil Treebeard, Don't be
I like Evil.
It was fantastic, and like just some of the line deliveries. Like, I would like for you to do what I am requesting, and just not even raising his voice. There is just such a level of power behind it. Very, very intimidating.
Well, but that's because when you have all the power, the Sultan doesn't have to yell.
Oh, right? For sure. I mean, then when he does yell, I think that sort of creates there's an illusion there that's being created, right? Because he's weak and he's slow moving, and you can tell like he has to hold his hands in a certain way, and he's very weak seeming. But then in those moments when he sheds that and begins to yell or begins to, exude his oppressive presence, it really kind of it flips the script in a way that the audience, at least I felt, and I thought it was excellent.
Well, there's an old world authoritarianism there to nobility, right? I'm the noble,
and he starts that way.
Yeah, and I think that as Americans, we think we're above all that. We've moved beyond it, but when you're confronted with it, and this movie confronts you with it, he gives him orders, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I am obeying you," because there's an inherent sense of authority to the nobility, and this man is a man of ancient nobility, so he carries that old world authority with him, and it's terrifying.
Now, maybe I'm the only one that noticed, but there's this pivotal scene where and again I'm not as familiar with all the characters' names as I am with Jonathan Harker, but with our hero, the real estate agent, and I'll have to look up all their names, right? He goes there and he discovers the body in the crypt and tries to kill it, and then Orlok awakens and explodes out of it. You suddenly realize that's an anatomically correct vampire because you see all of it, right? I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't think I've ever seen menacing. It was menacing.
Funny story. The guy who played the main character, I have heard. I don't know if this is true or rumor, but he has that prosthetic item on his wall framed.
Okay.
He took it home with him.
Well, I mean, but that conversation started. It ties into the end of the movie because what's interesting is that Dracula is certainly there's been thousands of scholarly things written about the eroticism of Dracula and that it's actually repressed Victorian sexuality and all that. And that's clearly in the book. I mean, the book is like, this is clearly some repressed all of it is clear sexual analogy. Like, I mean, it's like reading a romance novel. You know, what's happening here, right? But there's no sex in the novel, whereas in this one, there's kind of implied sex between Orlok and Lily Rose Depp's character, and so it's and I guess maybe seeing the anatomical correctness is part of that.
I think it is part of certainly, I think you're right that it ties into the very sexual thing, because that's how this ends up. That's not gratuitous. It has to do with the nature of this character and where this film is going. That we have those parts. Yes. I also think it's an excellent point that we've got the romance and the romance of the vampires. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is that element, the sexuality, the romance, and something like Twilight leans into that. Let's go romance vampires, right? So let's take that. Then you also have the horror of the vampires. And that can be a difficult kind of line to tread, and arguably this one does it.
But you know what?
You got the sexuality and the horror.
The seduction in this movie was different than in 1992's Bram Stoker. In Bram Stoker, there was a sort of sensuous seduction of her, right? In this one, when I was watching it, I was to me, the seduction was absolute authority, total domination, which her husband just couldn't match. You know, you've got the Nosferatu who's basically lording himself and commanding her to submit to him. And she's allured by this. So the seduction was this total domination by this masculine character, which is very different from the sensuous seduction that I was familiar with from the older movies. I thought this was a very different take on how a seduction could take place. Because she was
very contractual, right? Like the reason that Orlok shows up is because she invites him in. So he's fulfilling a request. And then when he meets her husband, there is that contract that's outlaid in front of him that can only be enacted if she agrees willing. So it's very bound by rules, I think. And
there's that scene. There's that scene where her husband's like, "I will kill him," and you're like, "Bro, you ain't doing anything."
Well, I mean, but even from the opening moments when Fraulein is, or Frau, I guess whatever it is, she's not Fraulein, she's married, not Frau, whatever, Frau Lily, right? What are the characters? Frau Lily, right? When she's there, I mean, they make it very clear that she's got the hots for this being she's meeting in her dreams, right? And it's like, I mean, you're like, this movie is about the bad boy gets the girl. That's what this movie is about. I think a lot of women.
The bad boy with the authority to do so. He is the absolute authority. He is the dominant force, and she recognizes this. Yeah. There's this primal sense there, and that's what I think was so fascinating about this form of seduction. He wasn't pouring her a glass of absinthe and trying to charm her. Like this was like, you will accept that.
Let me go here. I've got to actually catch up with a couple of Titter Pigs, but let's go right here, because this is true. And I actually went back and forth when I was speaking about romance and sexuality, because the Titter Pig Rancher for $10, thank you very much, says, might have to disagree slightly with this with Cameron, since none of the sexuality is titillating. This film is shameless about sexuality, but it's not romantic. It's very similar to Alien on that. And I actually, as I was talking, I kind of went back and forth with, there's the romance. It's clearly like, the Twilight is also there's sexuality.
Well, no, this is not titillating. This is ugly, raw. Yeah. We talked about user earlier in the podcast. We talked about primordial. This is ugly, raw, animalistic. She even says you can't feel love. She says it in the movie. You are not able to feel love, right?
And he agreed.
Right. Yeah, and maybe that's symbolically why he's actually biting people in the heart, which is different, right? It's not he's not biting people in the neck.
He does go instead of classically up here.
Because he actually needs the heart more than the blood specifically. So I don't disagree with Titter Pig Rancher here. It is not romantic in any way. It's that ugly, intense banging. It's like the caveman grabbing the woman and bringing her back to the cave, whether she likes it or not. That's how primordial this is. There's no morality to it.
Well, I would say that there is maybe an element of morality to it, because it's essentially, in the beginning of the film, she invites, and we learn later that the reason she invited it in was because she craved human companionship, right? But she is the one who sort of spoke this desire out into the ether, and it was met with evil. Evil answered, and so she was essentially inviting evil in. So I do think there's a moral element to it, but it's not overstated, right? So it's present, but it's not overstated, really only visited twice within the film. When she initially invites it in, and then later toward the end, when you kind of, when she has that confrontation with him, and she essentially flatly refuses him, right? Like physically, she flatly refuses him until she discovers what it is she has to do. So I think there is a moral element to it, but that doesn't mean that there's a sensuality to it. I think there is no sensuality.
I agree that the sensuality wasn't the allure. In fact, just to harken back to the Heroine's Labyrinth for 1 second, the masked Minotaur which is the Nosferatu in this case, cannot love, but wants to possess the heroine. And one of the things I discuss that this movie has is what I call the total possessorship dynamic, in which the masked Minotaur has all the power and the heroine has none. And that is obviously not in the heroine's best interest. And yet in this movie, you get a sense that there is still an allure to that total possessorship dynamic. And I think that is primally intriguing. It's primally intriguing. So, and this movie taps right into that. And it's not sensuality at all. It's not erotic. It is erotic, but in a different way. It's not romantic. It's not sensuous. It's not all the things that we think we're supposed to be seeing, to justify it.
While Cameron's away, let's go to the Titter Pig Rancher again for $20. Thank you, Titter Pig. Thank you very much. Titter Pig says, let's also note how most of this film is monochromatic.
Yeah.
Is that most black and white, a bit classic blue and orange, unless there's blood, which shows red. I didn't pick up on that. Jaron Blankski, I'm sorry about that, noted that it was a choice and challenge. No red in the film other than blood. I did not pick up on that.
That's interesting because red is a like favorite color of people who try to use color in their films as like a coding system. Red is almost always one of the favorite preferred colors. So this is like the opposite to like James Bacon's. This is the subversion of that theme.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'll pay attention to that when I go see. I actually would have loved to have seen it again before I was on stream with it. Like if I had an opportunity,
I can't wait
to see it again. I'm
going to go see it again for sure.
And if I can, I'll go see it again, and I'll take somebody to who wants to go see it with me. But so I will check. I will look for that. No, because but I don't even remember because I mean the part where he's dripping and the blood is dripping. I don't even remember like bright red. I mean I don't remember.
There are some flashes
I don't remember
of Ellen who because she has the blood coming out of her mouth and from her eyes. There are I think 2 flashes of her extreme close up with the blood coming out of her mouth, and there are some other areas of blood, the dead rats in the prison when he bites the head off the pigeon. Those are all extremely intensely crimson red. But that's really the only use of the color throughout the entire film.
Was there also, in regard to that character, and I'm trying to remember, so I might not be true, was there an merging of 2 different characters in this? Because I remember the character who's in the insane asylum who's eating all from the book perspective.
Right.
And they made that the boss at the real estate agency.
Yes, he's the Renfield character. He was the boss who eventually so when you first see him and Holt's character goes in to discuss his business trip and going to see Orlok because he needs an agent to go out to him. I think in fact the first pop of red that we see in the whole film is when he shows him the letter for the request from Orlok and there's wax seals next to it and he hurried. There's enough time for the audience to see it, but then he puts papers down on it so that Holt's character won't see it. I think it's Holt. I can't remember the name of the character, but
Thomas Hutter.
Okay, sure. I'm sorry, I'm saying the wrong name because
sure.
I'm silly and didn't read it beforehand. So those seals are done in red, and I think that's obviously is foreshadowing. It's important that they're red because of the whole blood mechanic with Orlok. But those 2 characters, well, rather that character, it's the same person. He just sort of slowly devolves over time into more and more mania. Like the next time we see him, I think he's taking his own blood and scrawling that symbol onto a piece of paper, sat in a circle, which again, there's more red there. So every time we see that character, there is red, and it likely has to do with his enthrallment to Orlok. But that's... I'll end there.
Big says going with Bacon's take. No, wait, what was Bacon? The moral element is that this is fundamentally wrong. This film was a modern Victorian epic, rather stunning.
So I think that he made that comment when I was talking about the moral element to their non-seductive sexual encounter or encounters. Okay. Because I do believe that there is an element of morality to it. I think that there's an element of morality to the whole film. It's just because that's there doesn't necessarily mean that sensuality is present as well.
Well, this movie goes to great lengths to deliver an unsensationalized version of this stuff. You know, when you are when there's when you're setting the scene, there's this oppressive sense of like the setting. And he's not doing that much. He's just showing you this room, right? This room, this patch of forest. And there's no frills. You know, there's just something like oppressive about the imagery that he is showing you, and you feel uncomfortable. I was telling Titterpig, this was one of the first films I've ever seen where when she's cutting garlic, the peasant, and putting it near the window, I was like, oh my God, thank God. They have a solution for this place, because at least there's some sort of pushback. Or there was a scene in a nunnery or a convent where there was and I was like, Christianity is trying to push back against all this.
That's true. The Christianity is present there, so it is there.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They're present there.
Well, my point was, but they showed paganism. They showed that there's these other superstitious like superpowers to try to push back, right?
And they're all. I really wanted to bring this up. They're all using different languages. Eggers' use of language in this film in particular is excellent. So we have Ellen in the beginning, vocalizing her request into the world. Orlok immediately answers in German. Then when our main character, our intrepid real estate agent, goes to visit Orlok and he ends up in the gypsy village, they're speaking Romani. And then later on in the film, they go with a liturgical Latin to sort of overcome or aid in overcoming Orlok's evil. So all of those uses, and I think that it's really very important to an audience because you could know what they're saying, you could not know what they're saying. Like Orlok, it gives you a subtitle. It doesn't give you a subtitle for the Romani, and it doesn't give you a subtitle for the Latin, but that doesn't matter, right? Because the way that the audience is going to interpret that is that it's foreign. But Latin's a very characteristic language. It sounds like nothing else. Nothing else sounds like it. And so going with the Latin, that there's some kind of, it's for, demon summoning, or it's for a liturgy, or there's some sort of religious element to what's
ceremonial. Yeah.
Right. So even if you don't know what's being spoken, you can still understand these things based on the language that Eggers decided to use, which is just absolutely incredible. I absolutely love it when he does that sort of stuff, and he does it so well.
Again, it's archetypal, like you said. My secret rule was always like you can recognize it even in a dream. So to your point, you don't need to know what the language is. You just need to hear it and you perceive it.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's powerful.
And Romani is one of those languages where it's very uncommon to really be able to identify to, I would say, a general audience. But right. I think the important element there for that set of scenes is the fact that we now have crossed a barrier into an unknown. So I'm going to use the word foreign, but specifically with regard to the reception of the practices, the celebrations, the rituals, the rites. He follows them to a grave. There's a virgin on a horseback, and they go and slay a vampire essentially. And the fact that it's so different and so mysterious, that's why I feel the language is there, is to sort of heighten that sense to the audience that this is now completely different. It should be completely disorienting because and man, there's so much that I want to talk about with regard to these feelings that Eggers is capable of evoking in the audience. But I'll stop there because
Well, I'll just piggyback that by agreeing. I felt disoriented. When he goes out into that village and he's in the forest and there's just a few shots of mist and trees and like a silhouette, a hazy silhouette of a wolf. I was like, whew, I don't want to be here. Like,
yes.
Man, I am very uncomfortable in this setting. And then you see the gypsies and you're like, oh, thank God there's humans. Thank God. And they're dancing at least, but you still felt the disorientation. This isn't a familiar crowd to me. It's an unfamiliar dance. It's an unfamiliar language. And like I said, when she starts carving the garlic, I was like, I felt an odd sense of relief. Like, oh, these people at least have a strategy to push back against whatever evil seems to be out there. Eggers made the woods scary again for me. Just watching this film, I was scared of the woods again, which is the ancient primal pagan impulse, right?
Yes.
To be scared of the woods, to be scared of the night, like
scared of the unknown, scared of the unseen. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I loved it.
This is Titterpig sent in a screen. But this, I think it follows. I missed one of his super chats, but I think it follows from this one. First, he had said horror isn't necessarily about fear or terror, but about an oppressive sense of wrongness that characters in the audience, by extension, are powerless to stop. Eggers' Nosferatu piles up layer upon layer during its runtime, and the follow-up we saw that one. His follow-up, which I think was a follow-up to this one, which we didn't get to, is this film made it explicit through the visual language in addition to dialogue that the scientific Victorian modernity is utterly insufficient in addressing this older and much darker worldview.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes me give you a story. Would you like a real story?
Go for it.
Like a real vampire story? Would you like a
All
real?
Right, go for it.
Yes.
In this world, vampire story that violates the laws of physics. All right. So this was told to me, and you'll appreciate this, Doug, because it comes right out of Byzantine culture. This was told to me, direct experience by one of I'm a Sufi, which is Islamic mystics, and so one of my Sufi teachers is a Turkish Sufi master. And from a very old lineage that's been in Anatolia many centuries and goes back all the way back to obviously the origins of Islam, which is all Sufism comes from that. But so he shared with me a story, and his particular Sufi order is very old school traditional. They got a lot of sort of those old forbidden books kind of thing going on, right? Okay, they also add that stuff. So this is actually a forbidden books story. So he's an amazing guy. He's and I have no reason to doubt him, none whatsoever. Because I've seen very strange things when I've been around him. So a lot of strange things. So he's one of those guys where, because he's living between two worlds, right? He's like some of the characters in this movie, right? And so he like that, and so very much like that, like a Carlos Castaneda kind of guy, right? And so he shared with me his own experience with Anatolian vampires, which predate, I'm sure the Byzantines would be familiar with them. So in Turkey, the equivalent of the vampire is called a hortlak, Hortlak. I think we would transliterate it, the hortlak, right? And so he was telling me that as a young man, he was, he's basically got that, the Mickey Mouse magician's apprentice curiosity, where he was learning from his Sufi master who had all the old forbidden books and that you're not supposed to read into. And so he basically one day secretly decided, let me open the thing and read one of the books, right? And one of the books had a invocation, a spiritual spell to invoke and actually bring, or evoke, not invoke, evoke, actually bring into the material world a hortlak, into physical manifestation, right? And he said, well, that's just legendary crap. There's no hortlaks, right? But let me try it out. So he does the evocation, right? And nothing happens, right? So he said, okay, well, I guess these are just legendary books in my master's study, right? That you would have in these kind of things, right? And then he tells me, and so he's in Istanbul at the time, this is probably like 1980s or whatever, Istanbul, and he's just going about his business, and he's got to get on the ferry to go from, whether it was the Asian side or the European side, one of those two sides. You can get the ferry to get from one side to the other of Istanbul, right? So he's on the ferry to go about his business, and he says he's on the ferry, and he's standing there, and he suddenly gets this incredible sense of dread. He gets this very deep sense of visceral fear, and he didn't know where it's coming from. He didn't know what was happening. He's like, suddenly he's overwhelmed by it. And it's just the middle of the day in Turkey, and he's just on the Bosphorus going on the boat. And he turns, he sees the only one near him on the boat, on the ferry, is this man who is standing there looking away from him, like wearing a long, dark overcoat, and like his head is covered. In some ways, very much like the images we have of Max Schreck's Nosferatu when we first meet him in the 1920 film. He's got like the long overcoat, covers his ears, whatever. And he's standing there looking out at the water, and he just realizes this dread, this sense of visceral terror is emanating from this guy. And he's like, what's happening here? What am I experiencing? And he says the guy turns to look at him and takes off his hat and you see the Nosferatu pointed ears, bald head, like described it, bald head, pointed devilish ears, and he smiles at him, and these incredibly long teeth come out. And he was just so utterly terrified. He ran to, I guess, whatever the bottom of the ferry was. And he said he saw that with his own eyes, and he learned not to mess with old books in his master's compendium, right? And he never did. He told me other stupid stuff that he did, but that was one book he never opened ever again. And so that's a first-hand account of a person whom I trust. And one of the reasons I'll trust is I'll give you an example of what he did. So I recently wrote a script that was inspired by a story that he gave me called The Well of Babylon.
Award-winning script.
Oh yes,
it just won New York City Horror Film Festival's best screenplay, whatever. So yeah, but it's set during the Iraq War, and this was a story that was told to me in 2003 at the beginning of the Iraq War by this Turkish Sufi gentleman, because we had built, and there's a link. I'm going to link all this together, so be patient with me. I'm going to try to make a long story. I'm trying to make a short story, but it's all linked. So basically, the story, what he told me was the U.S. military had built a base on top of the ruins of Babylon. This is historical. It's called Camp Alpha. They bulldozed half of the UNESCO site to do this, which UNESCO was quite outraged by, and I think anybody should be, because it's part of human heritage. Babylon is mentioned in the Bible, right? And so they could have built the base right outside because it's a desert around Babylon, right? But they built it on top of the base and bulldoze it. And people were like, why are you doing that? Aside from imperial arrogance, why are you doing it, right? Destroying part of human heritage. And my Sufi master said, oh, no, they're doing it on purpose. They're looking for something. They're looking for the Well of Babylon. And he told me the Well of Babylon it's a legend. It's an old Islamic and Jewish legend. It's pre-Islamic. Judaism has a legend like this as well, that there are buried in a covered well in the ruins of Babylon are two fallen angels. And they've been punished by God, and they're trapped there. And if the well is ever opened, they're unleashed, and essentially you have Armageddon, right? These spiritual, supernatural forces flood the world. And so he's like, they're trying to do an Indiana Jones thing. They're trying to find this thing to see if they can tap into supernatural power. So I was like, well, that's an incredible story. And then finally, 20 years later, I wrote a screenplay based on that about American soldiers fighting Iraqi insurgents who all get trapped underground and encounter this well, and supernatural events happen, right? So that story has never been documented outside of what he told me, that the Americans were looking for the Well of Babylon, right? The Well of Babylon is documented. You can go to Wikipedia and read about it, right? But that's a legend. But the idea that Americans were looking for it. But he told me the second story the same night. He said, that's one of two things that are happening. And this is in June of 2003. And he said to me, the other thing that they're looking for right now is the American soldiers are looking for the stargates that Saddam found. I'm like, what? It's like, no, Saddam found stargates. Like that movie Stargate, he said, was seeded with actual information that there are actual ancient stargates in Iraq that the Sumerians used, and the Anunnaki and all that stuff, and that it's real. And Saddam's intelligence guys found them, and the CIA became aware of it, and they're like, we're going to get these things, right? And we're going to find them, and they're in the mountains of Iraq somewhere, supposedly. So I was like, well, both of these are incredible stories. 2 years later, it was 2 or 3 years, like 2005, 2006. Vice does an explosive article interviewing American soldiers, special forces guys who claim to have been sent to find these stargates. So, like, my Sufi master's story was confirmed, at least by the claims of these soldiers who were interviewed, saying we were sent on a crazy mission to find these stargates. Like, that's how crazy we were in Iraq. We're looking for stargates, right? He's like, well, my Sufi master knew that in 2003, right? So this guy is very credible and unusual, had all kinds of fascinating inside information that would later be, at least documented in the outside world. So when he told me that he experienced a direct Hortlock vampire experience and that it scared the living daylights out of him, there is a phenomenon that we do not understand, and that's the point of the Eggers movie. And it's really the point of all vampires. Stoker has it implied throughout that man's arrogance and thinking that because he can die, that he can split the atom, that doesn't mean he understands reality.
Yeah, I agree. There are things older than humanity that science cannot help you understand.
Yeah.
Titterpig agrees. Titterpig for $5 says, I don't doubt this Horlock story. It sounds like the book Faces in the Smoke, though that's mostly focused on Caribbean mysticism.
Well, I mean, I know people who are very well trained in Vodun, the origins of voodoo. My Sufi masters are actually from West Africa, so I've seen all that stuff. So Caribbean mysticism, You don't mess with that stuff. I mean, they're like, Santeria, Orisha, and all that stuff. You don't mess with any of that stuff because they're tapping actual West African beings that are real, and you do not mess with them. These slaves brought that stuff over from West Africa. I know because I've been to West Africa and I've experienced the actual original religions that for which voodoo and others, Orisha and all these things are derived from, and those beings are real. I mean, they're real, and you do not mess with them.
Wow.
Yeah, I have some stories. I'll spare everyone. But
no, you got to drop at least one. Come on.
Well,
is there anything vampire related?
No, none of them are vampire related. It's just it has to do with mysticism. Christian mysticism. Mm-hmm. There are some like Teutonic mysticism stories that just there are things that you can. There are prayers that you can say. There are rites you can conduct. There are beings that you can call upon that you just shouldn't. Whether or not there's an actual belief there, whether or not it was a mind that was connecting things that weren't necessarily connected, it's enough to make you question. It's enough to make you question. There have been some things that I've done in my youth that I would swear still affect me to this day.
If you look, you talk about Teutonic mysticism. If you study the runes at all, the Viking runes. If you do those as divination, I mean, I've tried all kinds of divination. I find Viking runes are shockingly accurate.
Yes.
I mean, to the point that it unnerves you it unnerves you with how accurate they are. You're like, you know what? I don't know if whatever Odin is, I don't want to be messing with it. So.
Nope. Whatever else he is a god of violent death. So maybe just steer clear.
On the subject of the film,
let's go back to the film.
Heath is always the guy that has one leg in the rational scientific world, and I keep trying to pull him out of it. He's trying to pull him out of it.
I'd love to have a conversation.
The movie's trying to pull him out of it. The movie's talking to you, Heath. The movie's lecturing you.
The movie's lecturing.
These are all the tangential aspects that are all tapping into that same primal source.
Yeah.
That could be, and I'm like, it's one of my favorite subjects. So, and I do write about it. So there will be more to talk about that, I'm sure, as in the months and years. What I was thinking about, though, as far as the film goes, and somebody called this an art film, and I don't want to talk about, we can talk about what is an art film versus what is not an art film and things like that. But when we were talking about the physical representation of Orlok, the vampire, in this movie. He's in shadow, and it's Doug. You were talking about mist and things like that. I mean, you don't see him for a long time, and of course, it is even after you see him, you return to really not seeing him. After he gets
he's very slippery, very elusive.
He walks out, and that's actually the first time that I remember, like when he gets the locket, then you actually do see him. Of course, it's a classic trope to not see the monster like as soon as he enters or something like that. But this is a long time that you don't see him, and even after you've seen him, he returns to the shadows. You're not seeing his face. You're not seeing that, and that to me that contrasted when we're talking about a lot of actors. And I don't know whether this is true or not. Cameron can fill us in. If you're talking about casting an actor for a film, sometimes like their face being in it seems to be important. And, this is things like, okay, the medieval heroes always got to take off his helmet or something like that so you can see the guy's face when he's running
Pedro
around.
Pascal and the Mandalorian, man.
Right. Yes, the Mandalorian is a big issue. You got to show. Or the
Darth Vader. Come on, man. We had 3 movies of Darth Vader. We don't see his face, and that's the whole point.
Well, I know, but that was earlier. I know that was. I'm talking about now. I'm talking about here and now. Or you get some kind of weird medieval helmet that's like half on and half off, so you can see the face. Or Robert Downey Jr. that you've got to have him in the Iron Man. Now, here is clearly this is Skarsgård, right? Bill Skarsgård, who was playing.
Yeah. Yes.
So like clearly he is an actor who was okay with playing this character. Like it was not all about like his face, which is what I was thinking of when I was watching this. This is in contrast to like he was clearly there to portray this character. And maybe that has, if we were talking about an art film or something like that, maybe that's it. Like what is it? What's the difference between showing up as an actor that like, okay, I'm here to play this vampire. However you show me, that's on, the cinematography, that's whatever. you understand what I'm trying to get at? Did I not make my point or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, are you saying that why do they do that? Or
no, I'm saying that I liked it because it seemed. I'm saying that I liked it because it seemed like when he came to play this vampire, he was there to play this vampire, and it.
Well, they did de-emphasize the face.
Right.
They de-emphasized the face, and I would say emphasized his presence, and that presence is extremely powerful in this film. The presence is always there.
Yeah, that it wasn't like, oh, I got to make sure that like my face is illuminated for so many minutes on screen or something like that. I mean, it seems like this is what you can do if you have someone who is a very character, like the actor who is driven to portray this character and is not there for an ego trip. That's the way this came across to me, and I loved it.
Is the motif. I mean, I think Eggers is trying to create a dreamlike experience. And often in dreams, things are out of focus. Like if you've ever had lucid dreams, which I've had, you'll discover that the first moment the lucid dream starts breaking is when things start going out of focus, right? And so the idea of the horror of, the first like 20 minutes of us dealing with a vampire, we just see, like I said, smoky haze and whatever, because that's how we would perceive something from another world. That's what's happening here, because this being is from two realms. And so we are entering a dreamlike liminal stage.
Yes.
Right. And she's experiencing him in dreams. Yeah. The movie opens with that.
Yes.
Well, and even remembering dreams, it's like straining to stare at something through smoke, right? Like one of the biggest things is how quickly dreams fade when you wake up. I used to have to keep it. You could train yourself to really start to hold on and remember. But unless you're training yourself, the dream does start to slip away. So when you are seeing something that's vague but present, I think that automatically starts tapping you're cueing your mind that this is an archetypal construct. This is a reality that is to be experienced and felt as much as it is to be seen.
Shinotsky brings up the point. The Halo was another one of those. Like I was conscious of a lot of modern day ones where, like, okay. Whereas it seems like to me, like, okay, if you're signing up to play Master Chief from Halo, which I don't know a whole lot about, but that you're going to be in a helmet, and that you're, and that it's just flipped around. And right, Boba Fett, I guess, is another one that, like, because Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi was played by a mime, right? Isn't that the case? They're like, hey, here is a character who is going to be without his face, or maybe it was Empire Strikes Back too. So it was intentionally cast as somebody who can portray stuff.
I don't know if he had a mind back. He was an actor, and I think he did an incredible job. I mean, because he had swagger. That's all you needed.
Yeah.
He just, he walked. I mean, David Prowse had the intimidation of Vader just in the body. Just lifting his hand was enough to make you afraid. Whereas Boba Fett has swagger, has a sense of he's this macho dude, who's not afraid of anything. He's not even afraid of Vader. Like Vader's killing off Han, and he's like, or freezing Han. He's like, he doesn't survive. That's worth a lot to me, man. I want my money, right? You don't care about Vader, and so that's swagger. And that's all from body language, and that's great acting.
Right. Yes.
And Vader even goes to the extent that we'll compensate you. So Vader's bargaining with this guy.
Yeah.
Who is this guy that's getting Vader to bargain with him?
So what I really like is when Chewbacca freaks out, and then Boba Fett is going to blast him. That. Vader has to put his gun down because he doesn't care.
Love it. So I love. And then there's the other shot where Boba Fett's looking at Vader like, "What'd you do that for?"
Yeah,
but the portrayal of the character. So if you're here as the actor, this is about portraying the character, and I love that. And I hope
that's not because we're talking about it's all body language. Is that it is these body language choices is that these great actors can make. But even look here, we're dealing with the same thing here because Skarsgård is partly in prosthetic and makeup, and partly there's special effect and other stuff going on here, right? But he's got to make that thing real because even though he's under all this makeup and whatever, he's got to make this Orlok someone that is frightening beyond just the makeup, and he does that.
Yes.
He does that in his body language.
Yeah. So I'd like to go to something that Titterpig Rancher says at 924. It's a little ways up there. It's the difference between embodying.
I found it.
Yeah, it's the difference between embodying an archetype and just an actor playing a role. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And there has to be, because this is such a mythic tale, there has to be a certain amount of buy-in from the actors to sort of embody that archetype. And since we're talking about one of the four majors, the shadow, there has to be just a huge buy-in from Bill Skarsgård in order to really get that across. And so, he is working in conjunction with, I would call Eggers at this point, the shaman, for sort of making sense of, and this gets back to the myth point that you were making, Doug. So Eggers is making sense of this ethereal, unconscious world that it has the archetypes. And so we're only able to focus in on what he is guiding us to focus in on. I think that's that in and of itself is archetypal, but I think that it's also extremely important to the dreamlike nature of the film, because we're being shown, I think beyond the shadow of a doubt, we're being shown aspects of the human psyche that are universal. And so it needs to be this sort of, you need to really have that focus. You need to be able to point a finger at Orlok and say, this is a shadow, or these are shadowed elements of the different characters and the different situations that are going on. I think the mist kind of obscuring everything else that's going on around us, except for what we're intentionally being made to focus on, is extremely important in the communication of this story, as well as, and I'm just going to get it out there, the cinematography, which was just unbelievably excellent and very confusing, but with intent, right? So we'll see shots of Ellen laying in bed and we're panning up to the ceiling, right? And then all of a sudden there's a change and we're now above the street in the German town, and we're moving along the street as the lights are being lit toward dawn. And so just every time the main character closes his eyes, he's somewhere else, right? So he closes his eyes, he opens his eyes, we're in another scene. The audience has no idea how he got there, what happened between what we just saw and what's going on now. I thought that he was being eaten. Well, now he's in a room and he's totally fine. Like, these choices, the cinematographic choices are so incredibly important to the communication of this particular story. And the myth in particular, it highlights this archetypal mythic resonance.
It does. And when you distort images like this, what the mind wants to grasp everything. It wants to look and spot things. When you obstruct that with a mist or some sort of distortion, you're blurring the lines, the beginning and the end. It's hard to pick up on that, and your mind is actually disturbed by this because your mind wants something more concrete. And this film, the way it's filmed, just denies you that. It gives you some a sense of visceralness, like you feel the damp, dark, oppressive. You hear the crunching of the leaves. And the sound of the wood creaking, like it feels visceral, and yet everything is still just a little distorted. And I think that taps into something by itself, that distortion there. They have all this stuff too with sound these days. I think it's called Cameron. Have you ever heard of this? The ASMR. I think it's sounds that are 3-dimensional, and it actually makes it gives you a chill in the back of your head when you hear it. So I felt like this film did some of that too with some of its sound effects.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately, if you think about it, the first art that human beings have is sound, right? Before we figured out how to make cave paintings, we figured out how to make essentially drumming noises somehow, right? And that's the most visceral. Let's be honest, that's why music still gets the girls, right? Because it's the musicians of the girls, because it's primordial. It's the first art. And I say that actually as a Sufi because one of the great Sufi masters, Hazrat Inayat Khan, Indian Sufi master, 20th century, he was a professional musician as well, and he has this incredible book that many professional famous musicians like rock stars have, which is called The Mysticism of Sound and Music. And I often give it to my musician friends because it's all about how sound is what brings you closer to God. Because it is the only art that has no idolatry in it, because everything else, including filmmaking, has an image. Even when you read a book, your mind is creating an image of the story, right? Whereas the only art form that's pure connection without imagery is music. And so that's the non-idolatrous perfect way to God. But on the dark side of it is it's also the way to the devil, right? I mean, because the dark side of vibration, right? Vibration has many ranges, and a lot of kinds of music can pull you down or make you experience these, things. And we always have the deal with the devil stories in the rock world, right? But that brings me, I think, the idea of how music is so important to this film. We haven't really talked about it, right? Music. Yes. And the music is stunning. I think it's going to get an Oscar nomination. It's very effective. But think about it. It's actually continuing the heritage of the Murnau film, because the Murnau film, all it had was music. It didn't have sound, right? And so if you listen to it, if you go to YouTube, I mean, you can get the 1922 film on YouTube, right? It's public domain. You get it, you watch it, and people these are young kids, Generation Z, seeing it for the first time in the comments going, this music's incredible. I mean, because the music pulls you in. The music goes from beautiful and evocative to terrifying in seconds. And, back in the 1920s, when this was silent film, people didn't realize there were orchestras in the theater doing this live because they didn't have sound. So the music had to be provided by live musicians in theaters, right? And so the music of this movie is a continuation of how music was used in Nosferatu 22.
Very atmospheric too. It's not melody based. It's not a John Williams soundtrack. This is atmospheric music that will unsettle you as you listen to it. I actually listened to the soundtrack before I saw the movie and got a great sense of the movie just by hearing the soundtrack first.
There's an interview with Eggers where he goes over the sound. I'm going to, Heath, link it in private chat if you wanted to, share it out to everyone.
I will.
It's an incredibly interesting interview, and it really expresses the intent behind the sound design in the film. It's a really great listen.
Okay.
This was given to me by a friend, Blaze. He's a friend of the channel. He's been on before. He did the Mars Express discussion with me.
There was a great scene in this that takes this brilliant cinematography for one. And then it starts to distort sound, and the sound slowly gets more and more clear. There's the shot of him, he's centered, and he's on a street, an intersection, in fact, and the streets are lit up as if by like early dawn light, and everything else is distorted, and he's like a hazy silhouette, and he's staring down the street, and there's this like silhouette of something approaching him, and it creates a sound, and as the sound gets closer, it's the sound of a carriage and horses coming right at him. And he's like mesmerized, like a deer in headlight. I love that scene because I was so disoriented. I felt hypnotized just as he was in the shot. So, there is some incredible craftsmanship put together in this film that I think is just a treat for everybody.
I love that shot. You meet the devil.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
And he absolutely did.
He what?
Cameron,
you meet the devil at a crossroads.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true in many traditions. It's absolutely true, especially in the Caribbean tradition, right? But it's also true in Teutonic traditions, in Germanic or Nordic traditions, right? I don't know whether we talk about that much in Sufism. I'll have to look into it, but it's a worldwide tradition. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Cameron, why is Eggers able to do this in Hollywood today? His filmography here that we all love so much. So he did The Witch, which I love. I thought that was great. Now, then The Lighthouse. I think it's the one that you were talking about that you were not seeing.
I like The Lighthouse.
You liked The Lighthouse? Now,
I liked it.
I did not. So I'm going to say I did not like that one. Brianna and I watched that one. I don't think she was a fan of it. Now, Brennan, who was our director of photography for The Cultists, he was talking about it all the time. He was like, you got to see The Lighthouse. He loved it.
I loved it.
Brianna and I didn't really care for it all that much. The Northman I loved, and then Nosferatu. So so the Lighthouse is the mixed. Some people it's clearly very artistic. I see what he was going for, but whatever. So the Lighthouse is that one. But overall, he's bringing it when so many other people can't. And why is he different?
I think that he's just stuck to his vision. He's a guy that is doing all the wacky stuff that everyone says don't do period pieces, because I write a lot of period pieces. I've actually written a period horror film set that's actually has Bram Stoker and Oscar Wilde as the protagonists, right? I've written that one of my best scripts, and it's I wrote that 15 years ago, still trying to get it made, right? And this town's always like, it can't be done, period, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So this guy is a visionary director. He has something to say. I think the directors, filmmakers, and storytellers of any kind, I think that if you have something to say, you find a way to do it. The interesting perhaps opposite example of that is like Inception, our great director Christopher Nolan.
Yes.
So I think Christopher Nolan has something to say about the nature of time, but he doesn't know what it is. I don't think he knows what he wants to say.
Agree.
He keeps trying to figure it out with each movie, right? Each movie is about the non-linear nature of time, going back to his very first, right? And it's like, I don't think he knows what he wants to say, but he's trying to find it, right? So all of his filmography is us going on a journey of him trying to figure out what his point is about time, right? Whereas I think Eggers has a point. Eggers, I think the point is made when we just said earlier that the world of rationalistic five senses, the scientific method is a limited part of reality. And I think he's always trying to say that. Again, I don't know what The Lighthouse was about, but that's the three films that I've seen. It's consistently there. And that it's
in The Lighthouse.
Okay. So, and he also has, and he has a little bit of that. It's sort of a gray morality of everything, right? You see it in The Witch, you see it in The Northman, which is very, not even gray. It's pretty dark morality, right? Yeah. Immorality, right? Even the heroes.
Very intense. I love that film.
And but that's also how the Norse were. Their sense of morality was not our sense of morality, right? They were marauders, and they had no moral issue with it whatsoever, right?
And that's a marauder's ethos.
Yeah, and that, I mean, they created a civilization that lasted hundreds of years and expanded through the Mediterranean. Right. I mean, from where they were and down into the Mediterranean. I mean, there's something about that. Right. And so he has something to say about these issues of supernatural and about the id, the darker side of the human condition. And because he's so passionate about it, I think he gets stuff done. Right. And that's all. That's the only reason I've survived in Hollywood is I have lots of stuff to say. The problem is what I have to say is often very offensive to the political structure of Hollywood. Right. So I don't think Eggers is offending them. And that's why he's allowed to do it.
Cameron, would you regard Eggers as kind of a modern day auteur director?
He is, except that I mean, he knows how to make commercial movies, right? He's very much an auteur in the sense that he's the guy in charge, right? It's his vision, right? But I don't know that he's an art filmmaker. I think his movies are artistic. The way I would define art films are things like The Thin Red Line, The Tree of Life, Terrence Malick movies. Because I'll be honest with you, I hate Terrence Malick movies. They irritate me. They anger me. As a professional, because they're not movies. They're just cinematography of. They're like visual poems with no purpose, right? And I mean, remember that Japanese film Hero? Remember that film Hero? Do you ever see that? It's an incredible movie. You should watch it. It came out after when like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sort of opened up all those Asian movies, right? I wasn't Chinese. I think it wasn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't Japanese. Forgive me. It was Chinese, right? My Chinese friends were very offended, right? But it was Chinese movie. It was a Chinese cinema that came out after. There was moments where people were like, I think Jet Li was in it, but it's an incredible movie that's set in sort of medieval China, and it's a movie with a plot, right? It's about a guy who's trying to kill. About a guy who's trying to kill the emperor to get revenge for what the emperor did to his family.
Yep, I do remember this.
Yeah, that's a plot.
And he lets him walk closer, and he lets him walk close. Yep, I totally remember the movie. Yeah,
right. But it's stunning. If you remember, it's stunningly beautiful.
Yes,
visually, I've never seen anything like it. There's magical moments where one character dies, and all the trees turn red to reflect her death. I mean, my breath stopped in watching that movie. But it's also a commercial movie, right? So those are great films. I'm not impressed with movies that are just about the director jerking off and showing how good of cinematography.
Totally self-indulgent.
Yeah, which I think Mr. Malick's movies are. I don't think he has a point. Like I said, I think Nolan is looking for his point. That's why I'll forgive him. Right? Because he's trying to find out what he has to say. But whereas Malick has nothing to say whatsoever.
You're a better man than I with Nolan.
I like Christopher Nolan. I haven't seen Tenet yet, but I really liked it.
Oh, my friend, you should see Tenet. Let's talk again. Tenet is the ultimate example of this dude doesn't know what he's trying to say, and he's forcing us to go along with it.
See, Nolan used to be one of my favorites, and still with like the original Batman that he did in The Dark Knight. I mean, he still produced some of my favorite movies.
Films,
but in other cases, it's like, okay, I don't really understand like what was going.
Well, again, those where he was on contract to do them, right? And I think by the third film of those Batman movies, he kind of gave up. He's like, whatever.
The third film kind of felt.
Yeah, but you know what? He was like, let me get back. Let me go back to exploring the nature of time. Okay, I want to make this Interstellar movie that doesn't quite make sense. I want to make this Tenet movie that makes no sense at all. But maybe you can help me understand what I'm trying to say, right? But
he started off with that, right? With Memento, that was just kind of his breakout film as a director. Absolutely, 100%. That's what you're talking about.
Time is running backwards. He doesn't know why he's doing it. He doesn't know why he's doing it, right? He's like the serial killer. I don't know why I'm doing it. Someone stop me or just help me understand, right? And look, he's obviously a very successful filmmaker. He's made
sure.
I loved Inception. I did not love Tenet. I wanted to love Tenet because it was the only movie that was in the theater during the pandemic, and I wanted to see it in the theater.
I am the same way. I really, really wanted to love Tenet because I was Nolan. It's out. Like I really want to love this, and I make fun of it because it seems like everybody goes, I think I'm going to have to watch that again. And then no one does.
No one does. Because it's not like The Sixth Sense where you have to watch it again for a reason, right? Because you want to understand the twist, right? It's literally like this guy, there's something about time travel here, but the rules don't actually make any sense. Even more than time travel movies don't make any sense. This one makes no sense. And I don't care enough about any of these people to watch it again, right? And it's disappointing to me. It's disappointing to me because I think he's a wondrous filmmaker. But again, I just wish he'd figure out what he wanted to say. Hitchcock has a lot to say, and he knew exactly what he wanted to say, right?
Well, Nolan is taking on Homer's Odyssey. That's his next project, the Odyssey.
Well, it's gonna be told backwards in a time travel loop or whatever, and it's gonna be about the nature of time. It's gonna be about how Odysseus is searching for the answer to time.
Well, now I can see that because the Odyssey, it isn't told linearly.
Correct. That's why he's drawn to it.
And so now you're right. That's probably like, hold on, I could probably do some weird time travel with Odysseus. Peter Pig says, Interstellar and Inception had a point. Tenet requires 2 watches minimum to understand because it's played in reverse halfway through. Inception I remember liking because that was the first one where it was, maybe Memento. I didn't see that one.
I'm a huge fan of Inception.
I do not like Inception. That is not
Interstellar. I remember, I was in graduate school when Interstellar came out, and people said Interstellar came out. People are going to see Interstellar, and graduate students are changing over to the astronomy department or the physics department because of it. And I just did not.
That sounds like a pretense to me. I watch, and again, I've loved many of his films, but I watch Interstellar, and I'm like, hey, you know what? You know how this movie would be better? If we actually met this dude that Anne Hathaway's in love with, that this whole thing, all this crap happens because they're trying to rescue this dude. And we never see this dude, so we don't care about their relationship, right? This whole time travel crap and not seeing your kids because you're lost in a black hole is because she's trying to rescue some dude that we never meet. So we don't
Interstellar to me was not that great.
Yeah, because again, his thing, he's so obsessed with like the gimmick. It's like, dude, how about a human relationship? Give us one scene with Anne Hathaway and her guy, so I care about them. I didn't even know what he looks like.
Yeah. Relationships are the key. You have to be able to me, the invisible relationships between people, between things, between settings. Excuse me. That's the stuff that holds it all together. So when you start skipping too much of that, you get a little lost in the plot, and it's hard to connect to.
And the gimmick. But okay, this is becoming a Christopher Nolan critique thing. If Mr. Nolan wants to hire me, we're gonna have this video erased. If I get an email from my agents when Nolan wants to meet you, this video is not going to be around. All right?
Nolan was right about to hit send.
What I would do let me tell you what my plan is. If I ever get a call, Nolan wants to meet you, right? If I ever get that call, right, I'm going to come in. I'm going to have prepared the Sufi understanding of the nature of time using the surah of the Quran called The Cave, which is a time travel story. It's a time travel story in the Quran, right? And I was like, I'm going to use that walk-in. Like, sir, so this is what the 7 sleepers of the Quran have to say about the nature of time. And then, he'll feel nice British colonial. Oh, I care about all these wogs and their mystical perspective. Let me hear it, right?
Yeah, but Cameron, if you give Nolan the secret of time, that'll be the end. He won't have any films to write.
He won't make any more movies.
Because he'll still be a British imperialist. He won't actually take me seriously. So it's okay.
That's great. Well, yeah,
none of this is going to be a left.
I like you, Cameron. I like you a lot.
I just speak truths, man. I speak truths. I speak truths that are always ridiculous because life is a joke. We Sufis say that God has a sense of humor. We Sufis teach through jokes because it's actually wisdom. The Prophet Muhammad himself would teach through jokes, and his followers were like, "You're joking this." He's like, "Yes, the wisdom is in the punchline, right?" And so we teach through jokes because God has a sense of humor, and that's embedded into the universe.
And I think that's what is the underpinning logic of dad jokes. Just don't take everything too seriously, right? That's what dads are supposed to be doing. Just disrupt a little bit.
Titterpig for $5 says the mist is not always mist. It's often depth of field done purely in camera without any actual vapor obstructing vision.
Yeah, I got that sense. Sense watching it, that this was camera work. Know. But again, but even without mist, that's how we see things in dreams, right? We're not focusing on things and they fade out of our consciousness.
And I think critically, it's not necessarily that it is an actual mist. I think critically, it's that we are being told what to focus on by the specific direction of the camera, and so
Well, and in some cases, have you ever heard when you speak quietly, it's a power move because people have to kind of lean in and see what you're saying. That's kind of what it is too. When you distort images and then you put a figure there in the middle. It's a power move. You're forcing the audience to lean in and really look at it because it's like whispering. It's like not showing you the obvious. It's just whispering through images, giving you an impression of an image.
The Titterpig Rancher says that crossroad shot is actually a cross laid out pointing toward the audience that Thomas is walking down until he reaches the Kirks.
Yeah, I actually mentioned in chat that it's an upside down cross from a specific perspective, and it's also being trod underfoot. It's a very artistic shot, but it really nails the message.
The end of the film we've touched on briefly, but one of my only critiques of the book, one thing that surprised me when I read the book originally. It's how fast it ends. Because they go back after him in the book.
Yeah, they chase him into Romania, whatever. Yeah,
right. They chase him back to Romania. Right. Yeah,
that's talking about all those trains.
Trains?
Yeah, in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah,
was famously infatuated with trains, and that's the only part of the book that I just don't like.
Well, I mean, before planes, trains was the cool innovation.
No, I get it, but man, oh man, there's a lot of trains in the book.
But in the book, they're going, and then they encounter him, and it's done in like 2 pages. I mean, like what would ordinarily like today be like the climactic battle or whatever goes on. Okay, they go back and then they stake him, and then it's over. So I can see how, and it was kind of surprising to me, and I can see how if you're trying to do a modern telling of that or some kind of modern movie, like, okay, wait a minute, we can't just be going and then in the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, Coppola extends that scene. Coppola extends that scene quite significantly.
So he extends that
thing, yeah.
Yes, and then we talked about the vaporization. This is not the vaporization, and it's also her death,
which isn't in the 22 film,
which is not in the 22 film either. Which I thought was very interesting as well and significant that it was her that she's sacrificed herself for it. She's not, this sacrifice is going to be a terrible night for me. Like this was it. And I thought that was also very significant. And the remains of the physicality of the vampire.
Oh yeah. Very disturbing.
Deal with that.
Yeah.
And he lingers on that.
Those two lying in a dead alongside each other in bed or essentially,
on top of
the other. Yeah. I think that it's a sort of commentary on the consequence of her initial action, right? She invited the evil end, and this is the consequence of the action. She's responsible for removing it, and it's also going to, take her life in the process. I think I thought it was a really strong way to end the film,
Well, and if we accept that there is at least a reference to very visceral, primordial sexuality, animalistic sexuality, it ends with them in essentially a sexual coupling position, right? And it has to.
Clearly, yeah.
It goes from sexual fantasy to coitus to death, right? So yeah.
Did you have something? You said you originally, Bacon, that you had some other things to bring up.
I think I nailed them all. I got to bring up the cinematography. We talked about the history of Nosferatu, the design of the monster itself. I think I nailed everything that I wanted to.
Well, let me add one thing then. I just want to say I think Lily Rose Depp really is the star of this film.
She was great.
I mean, she's the range we saw in her. Look, her dad's an incredible actor, and the range that she brought says this chick isn't a nepo baby. She's got something, and I'm sure it's genetic. I'm sure it's watching her father over his lifetime, but she's got a range there that I'm really interested to see what she does now.
I agree with you.
I think this is her breakout film.
The momentary transitions between her seriousness to the mania to the the one scene toward the end where she's telling her husband that he can't satisfy her as much as Orlok has, like just the meanness there. And to be able to do that, just kind of transition through those dispositions seamlessly is not easy. Very, very good.
Yeah, I just looked at her filmography. I think this is her breakout film then, because she's very unforgettable and she keeps your attention, and she's the smallest actress in the show, and yet when she shows up, you're just focused on her. Like she's bringing something into these scenes every single time.
Well, and her size difference with Orlok too. That's a big part of that. We talked about the enormity of Orlok. It's also contrasted with her.
Yeah, she's very small. So but
she has some certain aggressive, erotic scenes, and also she plays like the maiden. So her range in this is pretty incredible, and she delivered. She delivered on a very complex role.
Yeah, and so this movie I think is definitely gonna be nominated for Oscars, maybe nominated for Best Picture. There's a reason, some people have said offendedly, why are they releasing this vampire movie on Christmas Day? It's a disrespect to Christianity.
Marketing.
They're releasing. I mean, they're releasing for the Oscars, right? They're releasing it because the studio believes this has a shot for the Oscars, right?
Yeah.
That's why you release things like Wicked now, right, rather than in April, because it's very simple. Because the Academy voters, they're going to vote in the next few weeks. It's just human nature to remember the movie you just saw, rather than the movie you saw back in June.
So I'm going to assume it's going to get nominated and possibly win cinematography. I think it's going to get nominated for its soundtrack. I think sound editing. I think it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. Whether or not it wins, obviously that's debatable, because I think my impression of the Academy and the types of films they pick, this wouldn't be your traditional pick. But this is going to be nominated at the very least for a ton of awards. She might even get nominated for Best Actress in this.
Well, I will say that there is a shot. I don't know that it's going to win Best Picture. I think Wicked might. I haven't seen Wicked yet. I don't know if it deserves it. There are a bit slim pickings right now. I don't know what they're going to do with who they. I don't really know that many compelling movies, except, like I said, Anora. If I said that to you before we started, if you guys haven't seen Anora, Anora, which is Mikey Madison, as I think just going to be one of the great stars of our generation. She's incredible in the film, and the movie doesn't go the way you think, because the movie is, you think it's a very serious movie because it's about a stripper who ends up getting married to the son of some Russian oligarch, and then the parents show up to annul it. And you think, okay, that's scary. Russian oligarchs is going to be like, they're going to try to, but it's actually a very, very funny and heartfelt and emotional film. And at the end, it's tearjerker at the end. So it's an amazing movie. I think Anora has a shot to win Best Picture, but I think that this movie might have a shot. I think that Eggers' film might have a shot, because the overarching reaction I'm seeing on screenwriter boards is just praise upon. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing friends of mine are just salivating over it, right? They are just blown away by it. And I don't know what it triggered within them. These are sort of like my standard, grouchy Hollywood screenwriter, atheist friends that don't believe in anything. It's something in it triggered them. Maybe it's the dark sexuality that they're all repressed writers are all weirdos about. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's something triggered it, and they're all raving about it. So that's within Hollywood. So something's happening.
Well, earlier, I had a conversation. There is a return to a more robust form of storytelling in film. This year also, there was Strange Darling. I don't know if you guys have seen that. That film blew me away. I loved it. Strange Darling. It's very unpredictable. Like, you cannot predict where it's going. It feels familiar, and yet it keeps kind of recontextualizing itself as it tells itself out of order. And it's excellent. It's excellent. So if you haven't seen Strange Darling, check that out. The Substance was a very artistic, very unusual film. Demi Moore is going to get nominated for that one. And then here's Nosferatu, another great film. So, maybe there is this, they say it takes a while to turn a battleship, but there is evidence of a return to some art and brilliance and storytelling, and I'm seeing it. This year, it marked in my head as a year where I'm starting to notice films that I'm really enjoying again. It's been maybe 10 years plus since I've gotten so many.
Yeah, and I've been saying it, as you know, Doug, on my Patreon. I've been saying it for a long time that the 2020s is going to become the next great generation of film. It's been somewhat delayed, I think, because we had a rough start to the 2020s with the pandemic and just the ugly politics of the United States over the last 4 years, right? I think all of that has made it hard for artists. But I do believe that we've crossed the threshold, and I think the next 5 or 6 years is just going to be amazing material that's going to move filmmaking forward.
I completely agree with Cameron, and I think it's delayed. I think there was an intentional effort to prevent self-correction, actually, and I think that effort has come up short, and I think now you're starting to see the creatives move themselves back into the front, and I think that they say the cream rises to the top, and I believe that. So I do think we're on the verge of another great era in filmmaking. So I agree with Cameron. I think his analysis is completely
Eggers
point.
is leading the charge, I think, for sure. He has gone. I think IndieWire recently revealed that the script for his next film has been completed. I don't know if this is a working title or if it's a title, but it's currently being referred to as The Night. And he says after this one, he wants to do Western. So I'm really excited for whatever he has to do.
Maybe he's going to do the Crusades.
Huh?
I mean, maybe he'll do the Crusades, and he'll bring some Sufi mysticism and Templars into it. Who knows?
Knight Templar, yeah.
But to circle back to what you were talking about, the Oscars, just to slide some real quick predictions in here. I had a conversation with Sable Phoenix earlier, and I think he mentioned it in chat at the top of the stream. He named Best Director and Best Cinematography, at least the nominations, and then I added Best Picture and also Sound. So those are our predictions.
And I think
nominations. I would love for it to win Best Picture, but we'll see.
And I think Lily Depp's Rose is going to get a nomination for her performance.
I think that would be a very sound nomination.
This could get nominated for makeup as well, by the way. Yep. There's a bunch of different categories that this. I think it's going to get a bunch of nominations. I think the big question is going to be which ones is this one going to take away? I think cinematography is to me that's its highest percentage to walk away from with an Oscar in hand.
Cameron, I know you have to get out of here in just a moment. Do you want to give everybody an indication of where they can find you? I brought up your Patreon, and I'm going to put their link here. So you want to tell everybody?
No. I mean, best way to communicate with me is through my Patreon. Both Heath and Douglas are members of it, and yes. I think and they've both actually been clients of mine in getting advice on writing. Right, and so it's you can if you're a screenwriter or novelist or books or anything else, or even short stories, you can reach out to me through the Patreon. We can set up a consulting thing, and generally, I think the gentleman above can confirm that it's actually worth the money and the time. And I think I point people in the right direction for the most part, and helps them. And so, but that's my Patreon, where I try to put out a Hollywood analysis news every now and then, some scoops from contacts. But I think it's a lively community of several hundred people. So come join us there. It's worth the $5 a month. I think it's worth a lot more than the $5. So hopefully people will come on from the channel. So
it's a great Patreon. I highly recommend it. And Cameron, I will be enlisting your services again here in a few months.
I won't say no to that. It's all good. All right, gentlemen. So forgive me. I have to sign off. I don't know. Are we going to sign off all together, or are we going to continue talking for a little bit?
We'll go for a little bit longer, but
I'm going to have to go as well.
Cameron, this was amazing.
Cameron, it's been an incredible pleasure. I'm so glad that I had this opportunity.
So let's stay in contact. You can get my contact information from Heath and Douglas, and if you ever want me on or anything else, I'm happy to come back on.
Oh, I love that.
I enjoyed this conversation. I'm hard to get a hold of, so I have not been on this channel a lot, but I love this channel. I love the community that Heath has created. So I'm happy to come back on when I can.
I will be in touch with you, Cameron. Yeah, I know. I've been away too. So I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Everyone will stick around and let's continue. We'll talk soon. Peace.
Take care.
All right.
And Heath, I'm gonna have to get running too. The kids are starting to get a little restless.
Well, maybe it's time. I was going to say that we did miss this. Okay, so Titterpig says Von Franz lays hyssop around the corpse of the woman and the vampire, which is what was used to free Thomas from Orlok's thrall and is typically a religious and medicinal plant from biblical times. I did not catch that. But then also, I didn't catch this either. With Titterpig said this was earlier that I didn't see this one.
Oh,
this
yeah.
Was, also, did anyone catch the use of doors? I did not. Does anybody have any comments before you go, Doug? Here, catch the use of doors
simply by the virtue of sitting next to Titterpig Rancher while watching. I was picking up on a few of his comments, and it's at Alamo Draft House, so you got to be careful when you make noises there. They're really authoritarian about it, but he was like, the door's open. Notice how the door's ajar. And so just hearing that, I started looking at the doors, and he's right. And it has to do with Lily Depp's character, whether the door is closed, open, wide open, ajar. There seems to be a very deliberate motif there, depending on where she is mentally with that relationship with Orlok, and whether the door is open or not. So Titterpig picked up on that. I didn't, but I picked up on it because of his drawing attention to it while we were watching.
I didn't pick up on that while watching either.
I
think there's also something to be said for the symbolism of the animals as far as predator prey is concerned, rats, cats, and dogs. But I feel like
really worked on that.
Yeah, I feel like that's really kind of in your face the entire film. So maybe not necessarily need to talk about that, but it is present. So if you're
it's again, and I'll say this before I go, but it's again a move away from sensuous seduction and more toward a sort of brute seduction. Animals feasting on you. There's something weird there, right? When we see the zebra pinned down by the lion, we're mesmerized by it. The fact that the zebra is going to go through with this, you don't have a choice. So anyway, there's something about that's primal, and it is a predator prey dynamic. And when you're watching, you sense that you're the prey. And so there's a fear there of that.
There is, but there's definitely some turning points. Like Ellen is always represented by a cat. Willem Dafoe's character always in the room with cats. He loves cats. And Orlok takes his turn kind of going back and forth between dogs and rats, which are at the either end of the cat. They're either, predators or prey, and that all plays in to the symbology. But it's like cats I said, it's pretty it's pretty overt, maybe a little pedestrian for a deep commentary, but it's there. So if you're looking for it, you'll see it.
Okay. Well, Heath and James, I do have to get running, but I love this conversation.
Yes, this was great.
Yeah, me too. It's fantastic.
Yeah, this was a great movie, one of my favorites of 2024 immediately. I cannot wait to see it again. I'm going to take my wife to see it this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to a second rewatch because that first, how it is when you see a great film. That first one's a punch in the face, and then you get off the canvas and you're like, all right, now I'm going to see what the heck I liked that I missed the first time. So I'm really looking forward to that second rewatch.
Yeah, the first rewatch is the one where you can really pay attention to the detail because you already know what happens. So now I can look. Yeah.
Not 100%. Only is this the first movie in a long time that I've been to the theater and enjoyed. I was like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. But I want to go see it again. And I'm going to take somebody to see it. And this is the first time that I've done that since Top Gun Maverick. When I saw Top Gun Maverick, I was like, I'm going to go take my brother to see it. We took our dad to see it. So that was one of those chain reaction films. I was like, I'm going to go see it again. And I'm taking somebody. I'm going to go see this one again in theater, and I'm going to take somebody. So this is the first time since Top Gun Maverick I felt that way.
I thought, to Doug's point, and this is something that I said to Titterpig Rancher as well earlier. It's my favorite film of the year. I really do hope that it at least gets the nomination, but I would love to see it win Best Picture. I think it totally deserves it.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, guys, I will see you very soon. Looking forward to more of these in 2025.
Yes.
And thanks for doing this, Heath, at the last minute on a Friday night impromptu. Probably one of the last of the year, and what a way to go out, right?
Yes, it was. Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good night, guys.
Good night, Doug.
Take care, Doug.
So that just leaves us, and we can wrap this up too, I think, because I think we said everything needs to be said. But yes, there's this week. Yes, we've had 2 holidays. I've got tons of stuff that need to be on the docket. You and I have got to talk about He-Man. We're going to talk about Beowulf.
Yep.
I was watching some He-Man for the past 2 days. On YouTube. Did you know there's a YouTube channel where a guy does dramatic readings of all the mini comics?
No, those mini comics are awesome. Those mini comics are awesome. You're gonna have to share that link with me. That's awesome.
I'll find it. Because there is. I'll find it. And I'll send it to you because I was thinking about you because he's added in the 1980s sound effects as he reads it.
Oh, that's
on
so
the TV show.
cool.
So we got to talk about He-Man. I got to re-edit some new some He-Man stuff. We're gonna be doing the classic literature a lot coming in 2025, like Beowulf, and we'll talk more about the Iliad. We'll probably return to talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie, and then also the film, the book. Brianna will probably have some things to say about it. So yes. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Bacon, for being here. Thank you to everybody in the chat who has been here also at this non-standard time. I hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas, and I hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's. New Year's is Hero Quest Day at my family. So New Year's Eve, I'll be playing Hero Quest with the families. That's why we had to talk about this now. So everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for being here. I will see everybody on the flip side of the holidays. Yep. Bye,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas. Happy New Year. Take care, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Thank you again, Heath. Thank you.